For most people, a school is the last place they would want to break into. Most people are desperate to break out of school by the end of their day, but in the following two stories, these unfortunate people decided to break into schools at night. What they found and what happened to them, they'll never forget. Here are two creepy, disturbing stories of people sneaking into schools. The abandoned school. My friend and I were reckless when we were teenagers. We were constantly doing things that put us at risk of getting into pretty serious trouble. We loved the rush of it, the thrill of almost getting caught. Some nights we'd steal liquor from his dad's cabinet and drink it out on an old, abandoned farm on the edge of town. Other nights, we'd sneak into the city public pool with some other friends and take a late-night dip before the security guards would do their rounds and almost catch us. We would soon learn that breaking the rules came with some pretty dangerous consequences. For the sake of anonymity, I'll refer to myself as Dave and my friend as Benny. The night that we snuck into the old, abandoned elementary school in the next town, Benny told me it was going to be the most badass thing we had ever done. "Come on, man," he said to me over the phone. "Just meet me at the park. We can take my truck. It's going to be sick. There's no security or anything around that old school, so it won't be hard to sneak in at all." "And then what?" I asked him. "What are we going to do in there?" "It's just some old abandoned kids' school, dude." "Is it really worth driving all the way out there?" "It's supposed to be haunted," he said. "Imagine catching something creepy on camera. We would get like 1 billion views online if we caught a ghost." Despite my protesting, Benny won me over. I snuck out of my parents' house around 11 at night, and I drove all the way out to the edge of town and met him at the park behind the library. It was eerie that night, a strange, chilling wind blowing through. "Are you sure about this?" I asked Benny as I jumped into the passenger seat of his truck. He had a wicked smile on his face and that look in his eyes like he was ready to get into trouble. "I'm damn ready," he said. He floored the pedal, and we flew down the highway toward the next town. The old, abandoned elementary school we were headed to had been closed for 40 years. There was no need to renovate it as they had already built a new school on the other side of town. Plus, there were too many bad memories associated with that school. Bad memories that had never been fully explained. You see, back 40 years ago, 2 young children went missing from their second grade class. No one could explain what had happened or where they had gone. According to their teacher, she had left the room only for a few minutes to get a cup of coffee from the teacher's lounge. And when she came back, those 2 students were gone. She assumed they'd snuck out of the room, maybe to the playground, but no one could find them anywhere in the school or on the school grounds. Even 40 years later, no one knows what happened to those little girls. But there was more. About a month after the girls disappeared, one of the first grade students was found in an empty classroom during recess time. His teacher asked him why he wasn't outside, and he said that a man named Mr. Simon had brought him back inside and led him to this classroom. On the chalkboard before the little boy, a sentence had been written. "Simon says murder." But it didn't look like the little boy had written it, and it seemed to be written too high on the board for the little boy to have even reached. The little boy said Mr. Simon was going to show him what that word meant, but his teacher brought him back outside to the other students as fast as she could. Once again, they searched the school and the grounds, this time looking for any strange man that might have led the little boy back inside the school from everyone else. But they didn't find anyone. Over the next year, rumors spread through town about the school, and parents didn't feel comfortable sending their kids there anymore. Many of them started to plan on pulling their kids from that school and sending them to the schools in the surrounding towns. And shortly before that summer, something would happen that would cause the school to shut down completely. They found a dead body in one of the classrooms. A teacher. That little boy's teacher. Everyone had gone home for the weekend, and even the janitor had said that the building was empty when he left that Friday night. But Monday morning, when they opened the building, they found the teacher dead at her desk, her face down, her body stiff with rigor mortis. She had been dead for days, and they could never find what had killed her. They could never find out why she had gone back into the school over the weekend, or how she would have even gotten in. They only found one thing out of the ordinary in her classroom, a name scratched into her desk under her face. Simon. Immediately after that, they closed the school, and because so many of the parents had sent their kids to the surrounding schools, they never reopened it. Years later, they built the new school, and the old abandoned elementary school was doomed to stay forever closed. As time passed, the school passed into legend. It became the old, abandoned and haunted elementary school on the edge of town. It took us about 45 minutes across the highway, and then we were there, parked in the rundown parking lot before the crumbling old school. Its brick walls were crawling with vines and littered in graffiti. Its windows were either broken or boarded. Its roof seemed to be falling in upon itself. It was a small school compared to the larger ones they build today, but as we sat there in Benny's truck and faced it, it seemed to loom over us, its shadow stretching out across the pavement of the parking lot and creeping closer to us under the moonlight. Beyond its dark windows, somewhere in that pitch black, it felt like something was looking back at us, waiting for us. "I don't know, man," I told Benny. "Don't be a coward," he told me. He jumped out of his truck and got his phone ready. "Come on. I bet we can catch something on camera." I followed Benny around to the back of the building where the playground was. There was an old swing set there, and one of the rusted swings swung back and forth, and the sound of it creaking cut through the quiet night like a sharpened blade. There was an opening at the back of the school. One of the steel doors had been broken years back, and even though they had tried to board it up, the local teenagers who dared to sneak into this place would tear them down to break in. When Benny and I found the old broken doorway, the boards had been torn off and left on the ground near it. "See?" Benny smiled at me. "It's easy. We just get to walk right in." And so, we went inside the old, abandoned school into those dark, narrow hallways that were covered in dust and rotting in age. I had never felt such an eerie feeling crawl over me as I peeked into the empty classrooms. Cobwebs covered the desks. The chairs were overturned. On the walls, in the hallways and classrooms, graffiti was splattered everywhere we looked, and Benny kept his flashlight on, pointing it all around us, and in his other hand he held his phone up. He recorded everything, desperate to find the slightest bit of something paranormal. For the 20 minutes that we were in there, I couldn't quite shake this feeling. It wasn't that anything bad happened. It was that I felt like we weren't alone. There was something following us down those dark hallways. There was something inside the classrooms. We finally made our way to the last hallway at the other end of the building. There was an etched sign into the wall at the hallway entrance, and it read First Grade Hall. "Dude, this is it," Benny whispered excitedly. "This is the last place those two little girls were ever seen." He shined his flashlight down to the end of the hall. "I think it was the last classroom, down there." He pointed to the end of the hall. There were 4 classrooms total, and his light shined on the doorway of the last classroom on the right. "Come on," he whispered. "Let's check it out." Benny ran down the hall before I could stop him. He left me in the darkness. "Benny, wait." I pulled my phone out fast and turned on the flashlight. I ran down the hall, and by the time I caught up to him, I saw him standing in the doorway of the classroom. He wasn't moving. "What are you doing?" I asked him. "Dave," he said in a low voice. His flashlight was shaky. He shined it through the classroom over overturned desks and chairs, all the way to the chalkboard. There was a message written on the board.
"I'm somewhere in the school. You've got 10 seconds to run and hide. I'm going to come find you."
Benny's eyes were wide as he recorded the message on his phone. "This is it," he whispered. "This is what I came here for." "That can't be real," I told him. "It was probably written years ago, and no one ever erased it." Even though I tried to convince him and myself that it wasn't written for us, I got a sick, creeping feeling deep in my gut. I turned around and looked back into the hallway. The feeling had grown stronger. Someone was there in the school with us, watching, waiting. "Let's get out of here," I told him. "You got your footage. Let's go." I grabbed Benny's arm, but he stopped me. "No, I want to see if there's more." "Screw that," I told him. I left the classroom and went back down the hall. I stopped there at the end. I turned around and shined the light on Benny as he walked down the hallway. He turned into another one of the classrooms. "Don't be such a wimp," he said to me. "There's nothing to be scared of." I waited, but Benny didn't finish. All I heard was silence. "Benny?" I called out. Next thing I know, Benny was running out of the classroom as fast as he could. "Dave, go! Get the hell out of here!" My adrenaline started pumping furiously. I turned and sprinted down the halls, all the way back to that broken doorway we had come in through. And just as I was about to reach the doorway, I felt someone grab my shoulder. There's no way it could have been Benny. He was out the door before I was. I didn't stop. I ran through the doorway and spilled back out to the back of the school near the playground. We didn't stop there. We kept running until we reached the parking lot. We finally stopped near Benny's truck, out of breath, sweating and shaking. We looked back at the school. It was the same dark and abandoned building we had stood before an hour ago, only now, just looking at sent chills up our spines. We drove away as fast as we could, and about halfway back to our town, Benny pulled over onto the shoulder of the road. He pulled out his phone. There was something on it he wanted me to see. He showed me footage from the school. I saw the empty hallways, the empty classrooms. I saw the message written on the chalkboard again. "Keep watching," Benny told me. I kept watching. I saw the hallway again as Benny walked to the next classroom in the first grade hall. Then, as he turned inside the class, I saw the chalkboard. "What is that?" I asked. I squinted my eyes and brought his cell phone screen closer. "What's written on the board?" On the chalkboard, there was another message written.
"Run, Benny."
"There was someone in there," Benny said. "Someone in that classroom. He started chasing me, and then he followed us down the halls when we ran outside." Benny's voice was shaking. I don't know how to describe him, man. But he didn't look alive. Benny never posted the footage he caught anywhere else. He was convinced it would only bring more evil if he did. We hardly spoke about that night after. We were too scared to. And we never went back to that abandoned school again. Hell, we never broke into any place ever again. I guess that experience scared us straight. The Witch. I was homeless when I was 23. I stayed on the streets, and every day the only thing I looked forward to was my next drink. My mother tried countless times to get me to come home. She wanted to help me get sober, get better, and get off the streets. But every time she tried, I pulled away more. I didn't want to stop drinking. I didn't want to get better. I didn't care if I drank myself to death out there on the streets, and I didn't believe that anyone would really miss me if I died. On a Wednesday, I met a woman named Katie. She was in her 30s, wearing a torn sweater and jeans. She was nice to me, but she was equally troubled. While I was addicted to the bottle, she was addicted to the needle. She told me she knew of a spot in the woods north of the city where we could go and never get bothered by the police. It took a few hours, but we trekked our way up and out of the city. We reached the edge of those woods by nightfall, standing behind an old factory. "These woods are haunted," Katie told me. "That's why the cops won't come out here. They're afraid of them." Honestly, I thought she was lying to me. People like her hardly ever said anything truthful, but I followed her anyway. I wanted a place to sleep for the night where I wouldn't be bothered. I had a half-empty bottle of whiskey with me as we trekked beyond the tree line. We didn't make it more than about 20 feet when someone stopped us. "Hey, what are you doing?" I turned around, but Katie kept walking into the darkness. I saw a man standing in the factory parking lot. He looked homeless like we were. He yelled at me, "Stay out of there. You don't go in there at night. That's when she gets you." "Katie, what is he talking about?" I turned around, and I thought Katie would have stopped. But she had gone even further in, walking forward, no stopping. "Damn it, wait up." I caught up to Katie, and we walked deeper into the woods. I could hear the man yelling at us to stop, but we kept moving forward. I swallowed the last of my whiskey and tossed the bottle to the ground. "Katie, what was that man talking about? Who's going to get us if we stay overnight?" My head was starting to spin. I had another bottle in my backpack, but I was trying to hold off to save it for when we stopped. Katie started scratching her arms. "They call her the witch out here," she told me. "Don't stay out here after dark. In the night she comes. In the night she kills you. Her school is out here somewhere. Has to be." School. I was drenched in sweat, barely able to see Katie through the dark woods. The sun was nearly set now, and it felt like we'd been walking for over an hour. There was a little moonlight peeking through the treetops, but it felt like I was blind in the darkness. "Katie, can we just slow down for a second?" I stopped and leaned against a tree, barely able to catch my breath. My head was still spinning as I tore into my backpack and got my other bottle. I took a swig, then shut my eyes. I felt like I was going to pass out. When I opened my eyes, I saw Katie standing about 20 feet in front of me. She was looking at something. The moonlight shone down on a little clearing before her, and in that clearing was an old, wooden building. It reminded me of a little church in the country I had seen when I was younger. The walls were boarded and rotting. The windows were all broken. The door in front was hanging off its hinges, and beyond the threshold was nothing that I could see but darkness. "Katie," I asked her again, "what are we doing here?" "She's here," she told me. "This is where she stays. This is where we're staying tonight. Our last night." I followed her into this little old building. Inside, I saw little chairs that children might sit in. There were a few desks, tiny and broken. "Is this a school?" I asked her. I took another sip of whiskey. "I don't like this place. Something feels wrong here." I had never experienced a feeling like this before, this unnerving, dizzying feeling. I had been drunk more times than I could count, and it was never like this. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, harder and harder. I fell to my knees. It was in that moment that I was sure I was going to die. There was something in this place, something in this old school. Whatever it was pure evil. I thought I saw Katie. She was floating in the air, right before everything went completely black. My eyes opened. I didn't know how much time it had been since I blacked out. For a moment, I thought I was back under the bridge I had been sleeping over. But when my vision cleared, I realized I was still in that little school. My head was throbbing. My mouth was so dry I could hardly swallow. I staggered to my feet with only one thought in my mind. I needed to get out of here, or I would die. I looked around. "Katie, where are you?" And then I saw her. She was standing in the corner of the room. Her eyes were open, but that didn't look like Katie behind them. It looked like someone else's eyes. She was smiling at me, holding a knife. Her arms were dripping a pool of blood. She had cut herself. And she spoke to me with that wicked smile.
"She sought for me, child."
"Katie, what are you talking about?" More blood dripped off the sharp blade of her knife. She sought for me, and I never ignore anyone when they seek for me, child. Her voice was cold. It wasn't her voice. It was someone else's, someone who wanted to hurt her, and me. She's with me now, child. And you? Won't you stay? Won't you stay with us? My head throbbed. Sweat dripped off my clammy skin, but I had enough in me to turn around and run for the door. But it was gone. The door was gone, and there was nothing there now but a wooden wall. Won't you stay, child? She asked me. Suddenly, I felt a sharp pain in my legs and my arms. Deep, stinging pain. I looked down and saw cuts forming on my skin. More and more, appearing on their own, cuts that started to bleed. I screamed at the top of my lungs. My primal instincts to survive kicked in, and I would have done anything to get out of that place. I saw a window near me. I threw myself through the glass. Next thing I knew, I was rolling on the ground outside. Sharp shards of glass cut into my skin as I stumbled to my feet. I started running, and I kept running. I'm not sure how long I ran or where I went in those woods, but the next morning, a couple of hikers found me while they were taking a morning walk. They called an ambulance, and they got me to a hospital. Everyone assumed I'd been attacked, but I knew they wouldn't believe me if I told them what really happened. I lied and said I was too drunk to remember. My mom came to see me in the hospital, and I was so happy that I held onto her and cried. I had never felt more broken, and after all that, I finally went home with her. I haven't touched a drink since.